My name is Gabi Chai. I come from the Universal Ministry of Transcendence. We are a nature-based church in Palmer, Alaska, helping people reconnect with themselves through nature. And a big part of that for us is communing with sacred mushrooms. We also run an apothecary up here, and we have guest speakers as often as possible to come on and share their wisdom and gifts with us. Today, we're talking with Erin Carper. Erin is a friend and a colleague from the San Francisco Bay Area. She is an ecotherapist and helps people with the wilderness rites of passage as a guide. Hopefully I am describing that correctly. And we're going to talk about what Erin does, what she's been up to, and also some of her work pertaining to the sacred mushrooms and her ecotherapy. So Erin, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm so honored and happy to have you here. You're such a light. I just really enjoy our conversations about all things nature, spirit, plant medicine. You've been such a blessing in my life. So I really look forward to meeting you in person. We haven't yet, but I'm sure one day when the time is right, we will get to do that. So welcome. And if you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you came into this field, and what is ecotherapy? What is a guide for wilderness rites of passage?
Oh, well, first, I just want to thank you so much, Gabby, for inviting me here today. It's been such a joy to be in connection with you. And as we've been in relationship for a couple of years now, it feels like we have more and more points of intersection about how we're trying to bring our offerings to help support people becoming reconnected with themselves and the relationship with the earth. So thank you for bringing me here to speak about it. And my introduction was great. I am a somatic or body-based ecotherapy and wilderness rites of passage guide. And sometimes those two things can be seen as separate entities, but I also weave in work with the sacred mushrooms, both with microdosing protocols and then integrating the ecotherapy practices and rites of passage practices with a deeper journey setting as well. So all of that is how I've been weaving my work. And like you, my guiding star is really helping people be reconnected with the land, and most especially with the lands that they walk, live, work, and play on. So I think sometimes we have ideas that to be in connection to nature, you have to take yourself really far somewhere, like drive to, in my case, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, someplace like Joshua Tree or Yosemite or Tahoe, which of course are all amazing. But some of what I've been really called to explore is how to bring people into relationship to the tree that's growing right outside their window, or the grasses that they see right along in their yard, or the birds that they hear in the morning. So yeah, and I do that through embodiment practices. I have a long time meditation practice. I have a background as a professional dancer, so I weave in movement. I sing, so I bring in song. Sometimes there's expressive arts practices and natural materials altar making, mandala making, as well as just really helping people make contact with difficulty that they might be experiencing through either just the path of life or even traumatic experiences by bringing awareness to how those experiences live in their bodies. And a lot of that can be reflected in experiences that they have in nature. And as you, I'm sure, well know, like the earth is a huge and vast container that is here to support us without really any question. And so a lot of times people feel like they have more permission to be themselves when they're outside in a different context than, say, like a traditional psychotherapeutic setting where they're in an office and kind of in a more relational place to take whatever their challenge is and bring it out to the land can be really, really super healing.
So beautiful. And how did you kind of create this line of work and this passion that you have for helping people with nature? Like can I ask you like what your story is leading into this?
Sure. Yeah. So I I came in the door sideways, as I think a lot of us do. I was following in the footsteps of some friends of mine who were already in an underground psychedelic guiding community here in this area. And my partner also had kind of started going in that direction. And I just couldn't get through that door. There was just circumstantial things that were going on at the time. I tried to go into a somatic psychotherapy program, and somehow I kind of missed some deadlines and there was miscommunication. So there was a lot of things saying like, okay, you're not going that way. And by chance, not by chance, I saw a flyer for an ecotherapy immersion who was being led by one of my mentors. And I was like, I've always enjoyed being outdoors. And I went to this day long, and I absolutely fell in love with him, but I also fell in love with the work. And so it just so happened that he was offering an immersive program where we were both learning experientially how to hold wilderness rites of passage practices, which comes from a very long lineage of pan-global traditions. But the lineage of these mentors is from the School of Lost Borders, which is down in Big Pines in the Southeast California, and Animas Valley Institute, which is out in New Mexico. And so it's sort of a contemporary, more psychodynamic way of holding traditional practices of going to the land and really being just completely yourself with no distractions, no obstructions to being in communion with the land. And so after this intensive process of both learning how to and then participating in these practices, I made the choice and just stepped off from 20 some years of exclusively doing movement practices into committing to offering the ecotherapy and the rites of passage practices. And so as I started getting deeper and deeper with that work and was watching my colleagues and my partner kind of getting deeper and deeper with the psychedelic work, I started to come back to my curiosity around, well, if these containers can really bring someone into a deeper state of relationship with themselves and all of the different aspects of themselves, what would it be like to weave in nature as a part of that? And I had seen such powerful transformation in myself and all the people that I had been in my cohort with my rites of passage program. So I started just integrating microdosing and bringing people to the land, and was started to see some really potent transformation with even just a very low dose of the mushroom medicine, some perceptual dose, right? And so I started getting really curious about, wow, like how can this be a partner? And it's almost like seeing another person in the space with you, except it's not just one person, it's multiple multiple living beings being there, offering, as people call, co-regulation, safety, containment, all these things. So, and I would say, just to note that not all of the people that I work with would be suitable candidates to be outside. But even so, if they're not, I'd still support the process of the more indoor, concentrated containment of the set and setting of a traditional practice with outdoor sessions to prepare and integrate that experience.
So when you say a traditional experience, what exactly are you referring to?
So in the sort of way that I understand how some of this lineage of the mushroom medicine has been handed down in the Bay Area, and then sort of integrated into a more Western palate, it's the more therapeutic. You're in an office setting, you're sitting with someone, you're having the shared process, and of course maybe integrating practices involving the body or what have you. But then the actual longer, deeper journey experience also happens in a contained setting, like an office. And then the same thing for the integration. Like everything has a sort of a traditional container, I would say, for therapeutic purposes. But for me, my office is being on the land, and oftentimes I collaborate with clients to find a place that they are really drawn to. So, for example, right now I'm working with a client, and she just, as soon as we started speaking about this process, says, I want to see the ocean every time that we meet. And so then I go and collaborate with location and scout a location that feels like an appropriate spot. And then that's where we agreed to be for our sessions together, is out at the spot at the ocean. Similarly, I've met clients by a waterfall or in the trees. So just going with what the resonance is for them, but also a place that they can access and come back to, even beyond whatever our time frame is together. So it looks very different than what you would say traditional setting would be.
It's funny because the language that we use to describe the what you just said, the lineage of the mushroom therapy, psychotherapy, and the traditional setting, like has become like a westernized clinical setting. And not that there's anything wrong with it. I think people have made like huge leaps and bounds, and it's also made it like more like widely known that mushrooms are amazing teachers and amazing useful technologies for communing with self and healing. Um, but the way that you do it, when you take people to an outdoor location that they can return to, something that, I don't want to put words in to your experience, but it sounds almost like a portal, like a nature portal, and also a portal to our own inner worlds that can be revisited with or without the sacred mushroom. To me, that sounds more like a traditional set and setting. And that sounds to me more like a lineage. So it's just interesting how we're describing these things. And I've also, as you said, like the lineage of the mushroom. I'm not sure if this resonates with you, but personally, I had to revisit my lineage with the mushroom through bioassaying and self-exploration. I was not introduced to the mushrooms through lineage like I was with the ayahuasca vine and the ayahuasca brew. I can say I went to a place that they were growing it. They had icaros, they had songs, they had information and lineage being passed down in Colombia that I could tap into as a student and as a person who was participating in ceremony. But with the mushrooms, I very much had to find the lineage through taking the mushrooms, like my lineage. And something I've been thinking about a lot lately is just almost every day these days is this deep ancestral connection that I feel with the mushrooms that I really, really feel, although I don't have living proof, I don't have any records or any songs that I can say like this was handed to me by a human being. The more I commune with the mushroom and the longer I do it, both the sacred blue mushrooms, psilocybin, and the sacred red mushrooms, the Amanita muscaria, I very much feel that my ancestors were working with these mushrooms. And as I work with them, I feel more connected to these ancestors who are maybe so far, at this time, many, many generations removed. Like I have a wall of my ancestors here as far back as I can. I'm looking at it. And I'm not sure that any of these people were really taking mushrooms, but they look sad. And perhaps at some point, before things became so lost or distorted with expansion of consciousness back into more tribal times, I do feel, and the only way that I can feel it is to just have an inner knowing. So I was wondering, do you feel ancestral roots with these mushrooms or in any way like like a lineage for you, or how do you feel about that?
Oh, thank you for bringing all of that forward. And I'm so honored that you're bringing your ancestors into the space with us. So thank you for them being here with us. And
Yes, thank you too. Yes, for seeing them.
absolutely, they're so welcome. And I'm so glad that you asked this question. In sort of my excitement of describing how I got to where I am, I left out an incredibly important part, and that is about my grandmother. And my grandmother, when I was growing up in Virginia, as a child, she used to take me through the woods all the time, or even just around in her neighborhood, and teach me about this tree and that bird and these flowers, and look at how this is growing, and let's take this out, but let's leave this in. And so I just had this very natural way of being with her that I had no idea was really deeply instructive of how knowledgeable she was about the plants and trees in that area and the animals and the birds and the lizards and the snakes, all of it. And so I learned that her mother was my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother all were born in the very western part of Virginia in an area that's considered to be part of Appalachia. And so very rural, very impoverished area. And my great grandmother was the person who birthed the children. She was the midwife, but she also tended the dying. And my grandmother and her brother, which were the youngest of seven, their job was to go out into the forest and forage for her. And she had herbs, roots, berries, bark, all of these things that she prepared herbal remedies for the people in this town. And so for me, even though there isn't something specific about the lineage of the mushrooms, as I have continued to be with them myself, I have grown a stronger and stronger alignment with that line for myself and have a lot of curiosity about, well, then who supported my great grandmother in her learning, and have been very curious to go back. And my ancestral line comes from Scotland and Ireland and England, and they probably were either gifted land grants to be in that part of Virginia, or they came as immigrants to that area with other people from that area. And so I've been very much exploring like what is my path back to understanding my ancestral line in the resonance that I have with the sacraments, because there was nobody just like you. If I look at the wall of my ancestors, there's some unhappy people there too. And just wondering like where it caught on. But I really feel it's through my grandmother line and my mother's side. So, and when I went to that ecotherapy program, the first one before I signed up to do the training, that's who was with me on that day. She really came through. And so my coming back to the land has so much to do with her and her way of teaching me. Um, and one other thing I wanted to say is that during the pandemic, when I really decided to step off and go in this direction, I spent a great deal of time out in the woods, out in the hills, along the coast, what have you, and being with the mushrooms myself and really asking them about how does this all come together? I'm feeling the call to weave it all together. And so like you, I've spent so much time just communing with and really hearing and listening and trying to understand what's the way forward, which is so different than the traditions that I was sort of in and my partner is in and that community is in, that comes from a very different line. And I never felt in my heart, I didn't feel like a truth of that connection, even though there's a lot I could say about the complexities of that, but I recognize right away that's not my line. Like I don't come from Mexico. I'm not from the Mazatec tradition, which is where a lot of those were based. But this line back through my grandmother and my heritage into the British Isles and Ireland and Scotland, there's something that's very clear in that direction and still exploring.
One thing that I love about you and is and something that I feel very kindred to you and have over this these couple years that we've known each other. I actually right now can't even remember how we met. I don't remember.
I
It
think
doesn't matter.
someone introduced us. Yeah,
Yeah.
someone introduced us, but I don't remember who.
Me either. So one thing though that has really like made me feel like a kindred with you is that you have been so brave to walk your own path. And
Oh,
um, I just like I see you and also like, yeah, it's just so wonderful to witness you following your heart and not following the crowd. I think it's so authentic and you really are like living the experiences that you are teaching to other people. You are like an embodiment of it. And that's why anyone that is in the area where you're working and offering these beautiful rites of passage and inner journeys in nature, I just want to connect people with you. And I'm sure that you're attracting like just amazing people that can it's not easy, and it's not mainstream, and those lineages of people that were doing things like, midwifery, like when it was very, very taboo and illegal, you
Mhm.
know, um, and it still really is. I mean, there's being a portal to these other dimensions, and working with the plants. These people have been called all kinds of horrendous things through the ages, and been ostracized. And even though right now there's a huge like psychedelic revival, I really see it going in a very clinical direction. And that, I don't want to say that those people aren't helping people. I feel like whatever is helping people is wonderful. But I get a lot of people asking me like, what are the directions, and like how much is in this? And they want to like medicalize and like sort of like commoditize like the mushroom again. And I've heard in passing too from people with PhDs and that are going into the clinical side of this. I can't wait for the mushroom to be synthesized, and because then I can know exactly how much to prescribe my patient. And my approach is so different from that. And I just, even within the more like esoteric lineages, I do have a lot of contact with these groups that come from, it's like a lineage from the Mazatepec, or Mazatec, excuse me. Mazatepec is kind of like a typo. They started calling a strain of cubensis that has roots in Mexico, but the Mazatec lineage, coming to the Bay Area and beyond, and I think you were mentioning like the books, book one, book two, a lot of like secrecy. It's kind of wild. Anyway, I feel like I'm diverging and kind of starting to go all over the place, but I really, really respect your journey and following your heart, because I just think it's super aligned with your teachings and your gift, your gift to the world. So thank you for your bravery and your patience and your thoroughness. I know how much you care, and yeah, I just think you're awesome, amazing teacher for people, such a great resource for people. So let's see.
Really appreciate that. Really, thank you so much for that recognition. That feels amazing. And I will say that I want to reflect back that that's what I see in you, and embarking on this epic quest to go to Alaska and have this really clear vision. And you are in it, you are creating it, but you're living it, you're living it, you're cultivating it, you're harvesting it, you're going out and foraging it, you're gathering this really beautiful community together. So everything that I heard you say to me, I feel like I could say right back to you that you're embodying the practices, you're living the practices.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite a journey. It's I don't know what else I could possibly do with myself. So it feels like it's what to do. I'm just doing what it comes naturally. So yeah. So you said something that was really beautiful. About when you have experienced times in nature with your I don't know how you call it, your participants or people who come to you for these services, um, and how even with a very low dose of psilocybin, you see them with more permission to let go. Is that what you were? So can
Yeah.
you just like reflect on that?
Sure. Well, it's so fresh because I just was with someone yesterday, and this is the I've been calling them clients, but I really appreciate that question. I've been really sitting with that myself because that's still in that clinical model, and there's a way that I almost feel less like it's a, even though there's the word therapy and all of this, right? It's the that I'm walking with this person and I'm with them on their healing path, and so it's almost like we're choosing to walk together, and I don't even know, like a partnership in a way. So the person that I was sitting with yesterday, who had ingested a microdose earlier that same day, had been really holding a lot of rage. And here we are, two women in alone in this vast stretch of ocean, and just with some encouragement and giving her some support with some embodiment practices and then vocalizing some, it just the ocean is vast. The ocean does and can hold so much, and it's just right there available to receive whatever is needed. And so with that, she just was really allowing herself to move through this very challenging state of being. And it was pretty incredible. Underneath all of that was some grief. You know, the rage below it was a lot of grief. And then the grief led to gratitude. And then the gratitude led to her spontaneously wanting to co-create a ritual of an offering to the ocean and appreciation. So this was all in a context of a sub-perceptual dose of the mushrooms. This was not like a big multi-gram journey space. And I think sometimes, even though containment is appropriate for some people and they need that safety and they need that space, there's also a way that I wonder, and I'm curious about, very curious about, if nature not only amplifies the experience in a way that helps deepen the experience without very much, but also allows for the person to fully be expressed in themselves. I mean, I've had clients that just can get physical with a tree, a dead tree, and take a dead branch and just really be active in that way. Um, I've had clients build a giant nest and want to get in it and feel held. I mean, there's just ways that being out in nature and being with nature and what's available right there, I think can really support helping someone move through something in a way that feels less effortful. And I, as the person who is in the guide position, the partnership position, I'm also not holding that experience alone. I am, and I'm not just me. I mean, of course, I'm always walking with my teachers and my teachings and my practices, but I also feel really held, that it's not just me supporting the experience, but I'm really being held by the land as well. So there's something very freeing about that for me.
So beautiful, so amazing, and so um it just speaks to like our roots and to our most ancient parts of ourselves. And something that just came up for me when you were talking about this was that I remember, and we've had some talks about how you help people reconnect with animal spirit as well.
Mm.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is, and what happens when someone is connecting with an animal spirit? How you bring, help to facilitate that kind of experience, and what it can be, as a healing practice?
Thank you for that. It's funny because after I shared about those sort of like bigger states of being, that's what came through for me as well. So thank you for catching that. So in my offerings, I also do work with the land that doesn't involve the sacrament. It's just purely a person with me, and we're outside with the land. And sometimes there's opportunities for people to go on a short walk or just even a short experience that has some intentionality around it, which I call solo time, or which is also known as solo time in a larger sort of context of a bigger wilderness experience where you might be out for days and days fasting on your own, just you and yourself and the land. And so one time recently, when someone was out on their solo time, they had a whole encounter with a spider. And at first, a lot of judgment came up because their first impulse was, I'm going up this trail, I'm going to get my body moving. But instead, they got caught into seeing this beautiful spider web that was shining in the sunlight. And they spent pretty much their whole time just witnessing the spider. So when they returned, pretty much what when they return is they have an opportunity to share, like, what happened out there, what did you see? And so much of it was about the spider, but there was all this judgment around, well, I should have done this, I was going to do that, but I didn't, because all I did was sit there and watch the spider. And so when someone sees an insect, an animal, an amphibian, a snake, a bird, I take time to understand what's their relationship with this particular being. And so for this person, they had a lot of aversion to spiders. Spiders are scary, spiders create harm, what have you. But when we started to speak about and think about like what was the spider doing, and the spider was doing this very intricate patterning of creating this web, and recognizing that the web is actually its way of receiving food, and it's also its home, and it's also a way to see them. They're almost telling us like, here I am, I'm in this web. It's not like they're lurking under a leaf waiting to jump out. Like, here I am, this is my web. And so then I spend a little bit of a time weaving in what I might know of stories or knowledge from other traditions about what spider symbolizes. But largely, I give that symbol to that person to make their own sense of what happens. And since then, in the weeks since then, just watching this person witness other spiders and how the spider turned up in this person's office building. They work on the sixth floor in an office building in the middle of the city. Like, there was a spider in the corner. I was like, okay, so what was that spider then wanting to share with you? And so it's a little bit of giving tiny bits of information from other traditions, but it's a lot of what is this being here to share with you? So it can be really powerful. And for them, it's also been a really delightful weaving into their dreams. And in some traditions, spider has a lot to do with the creation of the dream time and the transmission of information through language and song in the web. And anyway, so it's all been weaving together quite beautifully, literally.
Do you think people find comfort in these stories from our past? When, for example, your student was experiencing these times with spider in nature and then in their office building, do you think that it's helpful for us to reflect on what our ancestors or the people who've come before us thought and knew about the spider? Is that helpful information?
I think it is sometimes, especially if someone happens to have a story that is from their tradition. I recently had a client, and she is Mexican, and she had this whole experience with a dream where she was with a wolf. And so I might understand my orientation to that animal, and I have my own stories, but I gave it back to her again, not only to investigate, what was the dream about, and we did some unpacking of that, but what about her traditions? Are there stories? Are there stories that she might know? And it was so fascinating to watch a part of her memory open up about stories that her grandmother had told her about wolves, and how that then really wove into what it was that was alive for her. So I think it really can serve as a orientation or a reference point. But for me, I think it's very important that each person come to an understanding of their relationship to this being and what this being might be bringing to them.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And that's something that I try to remember and embody in my own practices with others to, go back to, we are, after all, and at the core of this work, trying to help people connect with themselves. So offering them the space to come to their own conclusions and to pull their own inner wisdom. Like when people are looking at some of the apothecary products that I offer, that I create and grow, the first, say someone comes to me and says they have insomnia, but they are very drawn to a certain herb or mushroom. I want to know, first and foremost, I want to explore what they're drawn to, and see what they're interested in. That is like it's pivotal to make a decision. And I do catch myself. I feel like it's like kind of like the Western model. And I know that like the Western model does save lives, and it's, there's certain things that Western medicine does very well. However, I can catch myself at times being, I want to always remind myself that like this person has the capacity to heal themselves, and I am not the one that's doing the healing. I'm just kind of providing a container and some options that maybe they can interact with that they might not know about. But ultimately, I love coming back to what they're interested in, because what I have been learning about plants and fungi is that they're so diverse. So many plants are like panacea healers, and I feel like Amanita muscaria was a pivotal mushroom in helping me to absorb this lesson, especially through my higher journey work with the mushroom. Just realizing that, in certain cultures and around the world, before globalization, we were only exposed to what was growing in our natural environment, like with the story of your grandmother having the youngsters go out and collect the herbs for her work. She wasn't able to get blue lotus from Thailand or from the Nile, but she did have what she had. And so I guess, like, I was doing a class on tea at Ken's Garden Center, and I was doing some research so that people could have like a little packet about the herbs and what the plant spirit says, and what kind of like scientific research has been done on the terpenes in the herbs and the different chemicals and what they do. And so many of the herbs, is like anti-cancer, antiviral, antifungal. It's like it's saying the same thing about lavender, about basil. So how do we choose what to use? How do we choose what to interact with, or which animal? I mean, there's many animals in the forest. There's spider, there's a squirrel, but what are we being drawn to in the moment? What lessons can we pull in? And who really knows what? I mean, life is a big mystery, and it's so wonderful to not know, because it keeps life interesting. I mean, if we knew everything, like what, I know I would probably get bored. Just knowing my own like personality. But I just love that you are asking these people for their own inner wisdom, their own ancestral wisdom, the stories that have come from their past, their ancestors. Um and it also brings me to the question of, like, when did we stop talking about these things? When did it get, I look at my ancestors and I know we have deep, my dad, on my mom's side, they're Italian, and they immigrated, in the early 1900s. So some of the kids, even my grandparents, were even born in, my grandparents' siblings that were older were born in Italy. And they spoke Italian. And I know the father had to go back and forth to Italy several times. Like, what was it? They were farmers over there. I'm sure it was very difficult to come here, and very hard and very scary, with all these kids, and it's going to a place where they'd never been, on a boat where they may not even make the ride, you know. Um, they left for some reason, famine, drought, whatever it was. But what was it? When did we come to a point where we stopped, and why did we stop telling the stories? What happened? you know I think that the conversation has the capacity to be much more inclusive, cross-culturally, about Indigenous wisdom. Personally, I feel this way. Um, you know, Human beings have been nomadic forever because we had to survive. So what do you think about where we come from and where we are now, as far as when did these teachings become lost, and why?
Oh, wow, what a rich question, and a very complex one. I would say that the way that I've been making sense of it is when we stopped living in such great and close relationship to the land for all of our needs. And in my line of ancestry, that I believe was when there was a huge famine and a need for people to move out of the countryside and into the cities to start to support the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And so they left a lot of their traditions behind. And then in coming here, at least for my family, it was sheep farmers on my mother's side, my great grandmother's side. So they came back to the land. So I think there was a way that maybe that allowed my great grandmother and my grandmother and their families in that particular town to kind of go back to their traditions that came from where they were from. But I think there's the separation as if this was better, more efficient, easier way of life. I don't know, like a story almost that was told around, oh, well, we don't get dirty, we don't labor that way. I think there was a bit of that. I have to say that I think that there's a way, and this is maybe going to be wildly controversial, but that religion has played in our disconnection from the land as different, larger religious institutions have kind of brought people away from land-based traditions like paganism, other types of shamanistic practices, where Catholicism, Christianity kind of swept all of that, co-opted all of that, and people moved away from, oh, well, those are my spirits, those are my animal spirits, those are my relationships with place and the directions and what have you. And we're going to take that and co-opt it into being saints and different orders of ritual. I mean, so many different religions have a lot of the same rituals that traditional land-based practices have, with everything from incense to candles to calling in invocations to a beginning, a middle, and an end, ecstatic singing, like all of this stuff. It's like that's been a part of land-based orientation to practices for millennia, right? And so I think it's a little a combination of what humans maybe, and this is such a broad swath on this, okay? People write their whole dissertations on this stuff, but just to say, like, I think it's just humanity's idea of advancing, oh, we're advancing, we're moving away from that primitive way of being, but in fact, now we're desperate to be reconnected. And in listening to you, I felt called to also say that, Gabi, there's many times when even if someone comes to me or they found me in some way and they just think that, okay, I want to work with the mushrooms, like that's what I want to do. But then just spending time on the land and building the relationship to the land and connection to self through different embodiment practices, mindfulness practices, movement practices, the land is the most powerful medicine, hands down, no matter, and all respect and all honoring to all of the plant teachers. May I be humble to make that statement. The land is the most powerful medicine. And sometimes the result of having that connection through the lens of that relationship creates the healing that that person was seeking to start with. And so the mushrooms can be a catalyzing force to accelerate that, or help to open someone to receive that, or even to see it. But sometimes it's not even needed. And I think that there's ways that I'm seeing that people just have a deep longing and even like a deep grief around the fact that we're so disconnected, and how, particularly I'm in North America, right? I'm in America, that the culture is so on productivity and busyness and acquisition of material things and capitalism and all this stuff, but the take it slow and be present and sit and be in one place and really notice what's there, that's not really built into the paradigm. And that also, I mean, the kind of like what we were speaking to before about how both of us really live what we do. We don't have very many opportunities to step out of that stream of being, to just allow ourselves to be in relationship in that way. And so, yeah, it's almost like we've forgotten. There's a forgetting that's been happening that I think is starting to change. It's definitely changing. There's a lot of people that are starting to seek connection in that way. So yeah, that's my my sharing of that in this moment. Thank you for receiving it.
Yeah, it is something that we could write a dissertation on for sure, talk about
Yeah,
forever. But I
yeah.
think what's beautiful is that through this conversation, we can at least, like, we may not cover every single thing, but we're like planting seeds for people to go and like start to think about these things on their own, and to start to question and ask questions, and remember So what would be in this this timely quest to reconnect with ourselves, with the land, with our more primal, traditional, ancestral connections with the land, through the consumption of psilocybin or amanita, or just purely, even through the consumption of like maybe herbal tea or honey or any plant way to commune with a plant. Do you have any practices that are like a simple that someone could, like, for example, that's listening to this discussion, maybe try to utilize to remember, to bring back some recollection or some intuition? Do you have like something that you could share with us that we might be able to do on our own?
Sure. Thank you for that. One that comes to mind right away is to make a span of time, and it doesn't have to be a super long span of time, could be even a half an hour or more is ideal. And of course, if you have the luxury of half of a day, even better. But to bring yourself into a state of more intentional consciousness, whether that for you is meditating, having some tea, if you have a longer span of time, ingesting a microdose or a low dose of any of the mushroom medicine, but even just without anything at all, just allowing yourself to open your five senses and take a short walk through an area that you can connect to some natural beings. Could be in your neighborhood. I live in a city, so it might be for me to go through a part of my area that I know people have lots of trees and beautiful plantings in their yards, even just really simple shrubs and things like that, even grasses on a corner. And each time that you come to something that you feel really moved to make contact with, take the time to really see that, to touch it, to smell it if it's something that has an aroma to it, to really take pauses, close your eyes where it feels safe, of course, and to really hear what's going on around you and to really feel the experience of the quality of the air. And so to just start to tune yourself in through your five senses is a really powerful practice. And sometimes people get caught on the sense of taste, but the way I like to describe it is, what's your flavor today? Like, what are you walking with? Are you aggravated? Are you feeling curious? Are you feeling really anxious? Are you feeling kind of shut down? And so to just welcome that without any kind of judgment around it and have that be the flavor that follows you in the start of your walk, and then just see at the end of it, what's your flavor now? Has anything shifted? And so that can be amplified from a short span of time to multiple days of time. But that's a really simple practice. And you don't really need much of anything, just your body and your presence.
So the first step would be to somehow tune in. Is that what I'm understanding? That's through like a meditation, or like a maybe like an intention or breathing, or what? How does someone tune in? I
Great.
think people might get lost even on the first step of this, with everything going on these days. It sounds simple, but how do
Yeah,
we do this?
I appreciate the question. So what could be something really, really simple? So it may start with just something as simple as deciding where you're going to go. Just
Okay.
making that step. And before you leave, just making sure you've got everything that you might need, some water, all of that. And then before you set out, just standing or sitting somewhere, closing your eyes and just really checking in with how are you in this moment? And again, maybe coming back to that idea of what's your flavor? Like, what do you
Okay.
with? Yeah. And then as you go, no phone if you can. Try not to be, listening to a podcast or
Great.
any music. Just really letting yourself be open to the world around you.
Like
And
no input.
yeah,
Like,
and better not to even do it with someone else. A
right.
solo walk is really, I think, where it's at. Then to allow yourself to be led by your impulse, so much less about again, like I need to, climb the top of this hill and get my steps in. It's like, okay, you're taking this time just to really be aware of what's around you. And when you come into contact with some natural being, could even be somebody walking their dog, like take the time to really see this being. If it's friendly, making contact, maybe touching this being. Or if you get drawn to a particular tree, letting yourself put your hand on the tree, see the tree. If there's a smell, taking in the smell of the tree. And so to just be knowing that this might be like half the block and back type of a practice, to just allow yourself to open your senses to what's around you. And then at the end of it, noticing what might be different about how you started out and how you're finishing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for recapitulating, because I think that for many of us, like these might be like innate things, but for many of us, it's like we need a little bit more help with like how to do this, and we need to be
Yes.
or it's helpful to have the reminder that it's like you don't have to have the input of a podcast or of music, allowing things. Something that I notice when I, detach myself more and more from the input is that things come up for me, and they can come up in ways of like movement or like a song. Like a song will, whether it be like a new song that I'm just a melody that's coming into my head, and then maybe it'll come back later. If I don't like limit my sensory input, which is like so accessible and it's so the norm these days to be like looking at something, learning something, listening to something with our phones all the time, then these are things that they don't have the space to be provoked. So I love to give myself space to hear the songs. And it might also be a song that so odd, but like maybe some song that I've never listened to before, much, that I don't like particularly like, but it's actually saying something, that it's like a message that I need to hear. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like I don't listen to Pink, but like this Pink song keeps coming in my head, and it's like, and it's saying a very clear message. And it's like, what is that message? So nothing, we are allowed to like wonder, and
Absolutely.
yeah, so I love this idea of the solo walk, and like, nothing um coming between you and being in the moment, pretty
Mhm.
much.
Absolutely. And I
Um,
think allowing yourself to be drawn to, like what is your impulse to go investigate? And it could be not that far, could be really far, but to have it be something that you're not planning necessarily or thinking, oh, I'm going here. I mean, of course, if you've got you have to cross the street and you know where you're turning, but like to just be led. And what is it like to just allow yourself to be led in the experience too?
that's like a spot, like having a sort of an idea of where you're going, but allowing like spontaneity. Is that what you're?
Allowing for spontaneity, something to surprise you, and to, like this person I was describing in the spider, like take some time to be with what it is that you're curious about and really see it, really witness it, and then go to the next thing.
So it's almost time for us to depart, but I wanted to I could talk to you all day about this. I have a million more questions, and I'm sure the people that are watching this do too. But do you want to just tell us like what you're working on right now, and like what's exciting you in your world these days? What's going on? What offerings you have, and then also how people can find you. And I will put, if it's okay, all of your info in the bio and the links, so that if people want to get a hold of you, they can do that.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So right now I am in a phase of integration. So I don't have anything coming up at the moment that's a big, exciting offering. However, here in the Bay Area, I am open to working with individuals. I am offering a summer solstice day program, which will be in the local regional park district here. And that's going to be on Sunday, June 17th. And that's an
Okay.
in-person day on the land. So time for sharing and land practices and some solo time. It is not an offering with the sacrament, but it is a day of land medicine. I also offer custom rites of passage facilitation. So, as an example, I created a ceremony for someone's 70th birthday celebration. So, it wasn't just a party, but it was a way for this person to bring their community together to really honor her coming into her elderhood and turning 70, and involved movement and art making and some sharing, and had a really lovely container around it. Similarly, I created a ceremony for two women who were starting a business together and really wanted to be witnessed and honored by their community in a certain way. And so there's a way that I can weave those practices together to support some special moment in your life, something that you're marking, something that you're calling in. I have supported a client calling in a new child in her life. So making room for a new life in her life. So there's ways that the rites of passage work can weave in. And of course, if people want to find me, I'm happy to put them on my mailing list for future offerings.
Amazing. I love this idea of honoring rites of passage. It's just another thing that has been just sort of, I see it as being a little bit distorted, maybe a lot, in this like modern world. And I just absolutely love this offering that you have. I can only imagine the beautiful gifts that you bring to something like that. So that is just so cool. So yeah, thank you so much, Erin, for your time and your wisdom and just for being you and showing up in all your authenticity.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Gabby.
you.
I so appreciate you, Gabby, so much. And thank you for making the space for me to be here. I'm truly honored, and it's such a gift, your presence in my life. Thank you so much for all that you bring.
Thank you. Yes. So I will, in closing, we will put all the information to get a hold of Erin in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone who was able to come join us and to listen to this offering. And I hope you have a great day, Erin,
Thank you
and talk
too.
to you soon. Okay. Be well. Peace.